at from a service perspective, we primarily look at it from a more detailed perspective, where we have international and domestic connectivities as well. We have issues where we want to bring, let's say, business users to a particular place. We want to run particular applications. So what I'm interested in is whether this box will provide us with all the possible scenarios which different companies would have. Maybe a financial institution would have a different set of requirements. But from a company perspective that I work in, certain tools run from the intranet and maybe from different countries, certain tools which are part of our current disaster recovery plan, for which we have to maintain different set of services, maybe at a different location. So, I mean, this is what I would be interested in.
Sure. So I don't think that the way we trying to position the disaster recovery box or the plans is from a context that it's a one solution framework. The positioning of the solution is really from a context of saying that in your enterprise environment, you typically do disaster recovery solutions for about 5% of your most critical applications, which will still continue doing the traditional way. But then there is that 95% of the infrastructure which you are probably not protecting because of the fact that there's too much of investments, too much of support issues involved to create a disaster recovery for your entire range of infrastructure. Using these kind of solutions, you could practically go in and make your environment much more available. The solution, if I had to go into that detail, is again from a context of gives you the capability to replicate the entire workload, irrespective of where it is sitting, whether it is sitting in Japan or China or whatever for that matter, right? And again, be aware of the fact that this is not a data replication solution. When we talk of the disaster recovery in a box plans, it's basically replicating the entire server. Let me just share with you one example of a customer in India, HSBC Bank. They want to migrate about 300 servers from one of their data centers, let's say in Karachi, to a data center in Lahore, right? These are customer-facing servers, and they didn't want to bring down those servers. So what they do, they look at some of these intelligent workload management tools, leverage a technology called Spin, and migrate the entire servers without bringing down service, right? So the service is absolutely up and running, except for probably a couple of minutes where the users are being cut off from a Karachi data center to a Lahore data center for that matter. Right? Look at it from a context that today when you have to go into a hardware refresh, you buy a new hardware, do you really see a challenge when you figure out who's going to come and reinstall the OS for me, reinstall the users in the application environment and bring in the data, hope he's not going to corrupt my data? Do you see that as a challenge?
I think more than hardware migration, we face the problem and we have to migrate the software or the data, in fact, from old Unix-based sequential files to Fox profiles and then to Oracle tables and whatever. That has been a nightmare for us practically many times.
Sure. I suppose these are still technology challenges which have not been addressed, right? But I am coming more from a context of saying that, let's say for example, you have your laptop which you've been using for the last 5 years, right? And you've installed so many things out there which is of your interest. You've got a lot of passwords saved in your browsers and other application data. And now you get a new laptop, right? And your IT guy comes in and says, sir, I need your laptop for the next 2 days. Why? Because you got a new laptop. So I have to do the entire data migration and I have to rebuild the image and stuff like this. A simple example like that, right? Now, in that kind of an environment, how good it would feel if the IT guy was to come in and say, okay, keep on working on your laptop, right? I'm going to be doing something at the back end where from a context I'm going to copy your workload, move it onto the new laptop, paste it there, and once it's pasted, I'm going to give you a new laptop saying, sir, please start using this. Whatever there, which was there on your old laptop, is now here. So, from our context, where we are seeing is that, one of the biggest thing which we are seeing is in terms of virtualization. A lot of customers are wanting to move the virtualization way. Any of you also planning to look at virtualization?
Is there anyone who is already engaged?
Right. Now, if you look at virtualization, what's your approach? How are you trying to get into that space?
We are in that space.
You are already in that space. Beautiful. So let me take that as a second question, right? But in your case, are you looking at evaluating virtualization right now?
I think we'll be way ahead in terms of
Way ahead in, okay, so beautiful. So in that case,
I think most of us are already, so this is probably not something new.
Sure.
Probably some.
absolutely great.
Yeah, that's not.
So let me put it from this context, while you guys are in
about
advance.
near the other part, other end of the tunnel. We can see the light from this.
Good.
We'll go as far as that.
So let me put it in a different context. You already had a way advanced environment of virtualization and you selected a vendor of your choice. And let's say for example, for whatever reason, the way the proprietary open source challenges have been thrown to the industry, say tomorrow there is a new virtualization vendor who basically comes out and says that well, I have a low cost virtualization technology and I can be much more secure, much more reliable, much more scalable, etc., 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 etc. How are you going to move your existing virtual environment from your current vendor to the next vendor?
I think I would like to add a bit of my thoughts over here. And it's much more beyond than just the cost, someone coming pitching me the cost. I would rather first line my own strategy and I would see where that gentleman or the company stands. See, as a company, as we grow, we have these strategies. Now, the trend altogether has changed. We're no more the IT as an expense center, we are more as an IT as a business enabler. And in most of the cases, we are by and large as IT as a profit center. So we have our own auditing, we have our own accounting system whereby we charge out the business, and that makes us a profit organization no more as a cost center. So we would sell out that part. Besides that, the IT is much more aligned to the business strategy. So that alignment also comes in. Apart from that, choosing just a vendor who could just come in and pitch a very cheap virtualization solution, it also translates or transforms into how your infrastructure would react to that. Let's say I decide to opt for a VM, you've been naming it, I prefer to be very nervous in terms of the product, but as you mentioned here, I'm going to be giving out a slightly more specific example.
My mandate is being platform agnostic.
So, like, let's say someone and company X goes ahead and opt for a VMware ESX solution. That would not solve the mystery altogether. He may think that the cost has been brought down just by bringing in that ESX solution, which might have been a wrong perception altogether. It has slightly more beyond that, because your VM virtualization, your consolidation initiative needs to be well integrated with your infrastructure. How does your switching platform behave and is well aligned towards your virtualization area altogether?
I agree to that, but where I was coming from is, let's say VMware, one of our good friends and partners in our business for virtualization, they still charge money for giving you the ESX and giving you those management tools, etc., etc., right? And if I'm not wrong, you would have a huge investment with Microsoft on the other side, right? So Microsoft now comes up and says, you know what, you buy Windows 2008, we'll give you Hyper-V free. You buy Windows 2008, we'll give you the management tools free. Now, from your technology landscape, if I'm not wrong, your relationship, your confidence with Microsoft not being a low-cost solution, very high-cost solution.
I was not actually referring to specifically in that context.
So where I was coming from.
Where I was leading to is that just the cost would not be a factor in making my decisions.
Absolutely, I agree.
Like, for example, what I mentioned, if someone approaches me and says that, okay, I've got a very cheap virtualization solution, I need to sit back and see that the investment that I had done in my virtualization, in my other part of the infrastructure, in terms of my business continuity planning, in terms of with the alignment of the BCP to my DR, if all that blocks fits in and the ROI and the TCO makes sense, I don't see that as a problem. But just as fixing one block with a cost and increasing the other vertical sky high would not be a very viable decision.
I agree.
I'm creating some money out what Mary has to say with that also, and also actually referencing to your right, Imran Malisa. I'd also like to find out what your background on it, but Mary, you wanna, do you agree with what President said?
No, I totally agree with what Lisa was saying. I think that, to be honest with you, I think most of the CIOs would never make a decision based on someone coming and saying that it's going to be cheap with them. We will do it based on judgment, based on your infrastructure, your environment, and taking into consideration all the, the entire architecture of the system. So it's not as simple as that. And I don't think many of us in this room would agree that we want to buy any type of box from any vendor. We buy a solution that fits our environment.
See,
So
it takes
I
a
totally
woman.
agree.
It takes a woman to lead the way.
Right, good point. Yeah, but the interesting piece is which comes here, right? The interesting piece which I was trying to drive at the point of talking of cost is not really from the context of cost. Let's say, for example, you get a technology and you get a solution which convinces your IT architecture, your IT landscape that yes, this is the right solution for me, whether that's physical, whether that's cloud, whether that's virtual. Do you still have the technology to be agnostic to those landscapes in your current environment? So it's not really trying to say that, well, we have the tools to do that, but I'm basically giving a thought to you saying that, do you keep your technology decisions and your solution decisions, that while you move that path, you're going to remain agnostic to that vendor at a stage where you want to go?
I think even at this point in time, when I think by and large, most of the people in the CIOs would agree with me, in the industry, none of them are very agnostic towards specific vendors. As and when we go along in terms of the solution, it would vary with the flavor, because virtualization is just not VMware by EMC, virtualization is also by the IBM T-Series LPAR virtualization, it goes down to the storage box virtualization, it goes down to the Microsoft ASCOM and the other bits and pieces, then it goes on to the HP Unix, which you do on the HP SuperDoom. So as and when the solution altogether comes in as a package, it's never specific that, okay, I'm focused, I'm going to do the VM by EMC. No, it's never like that. And plus, beside that, it also depends that what kind of an infrastructure that you have positioned. Let's say you're running an SOA-based architecture, so it has to be aligned with that.
Ransa?
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yes.
I am from the data communication side of business, so I move bits from point A to point B for a living. So we fully support the ideas that were shared with the group by the gentleman from Siemens, that in the current infrastructure environment, where the solutions are across countries and boundaries, connectivity plays a very important role. So my 2 cents or 2 bits for this group is that the boxes are pretty much immaterial these days. It has to be an open architecture which lets you interact with different vendors and hopefully move as much towards cloud computing as possible, because that's where we make the money. But anyways, thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yeah, my pleasure there. But it was interesting that well, 99% of articles written, including by people like me, are all about the cloud. It's only 1% of business that would actually move to the cloud. Is that still, I mean, what's the hesitancy there? It's the best thing that's happened to mankind since COVID.
There was actually a very interesting article this morning from Computer World about cloud computing forums are now desperately trying to address, because without that, companies realize the benefit, but they wouldn't go for it.
Absolutely.
And I think connectivity is a major issue in Pakistan. I think. Can you ensure that you are always connected to the cloud?
There is one thing I'd like to add in this. Yes, cloud computing is very excellent. The whole world, I mean, not moving towards it, but thinking, evaluating it. There's a lot of limitations towards it at this moment. Application compatibility. Your application will go for it with the interchangeable of the architecture. A lot of legacy applications don't allow it at this moment. What is cloud computing? We're talking about virtualization in a bigger environment. Mix and matching your hardware. In virtualization, we're talking about one hardware, utilizing it effectively. In cloud computing, you are mix matching your hundreds of hardware. The cloud computing is there. The applications don't allow it at this moment. Some of them do, some of them don't. We are moving towards it as HP. We have done a lot of projects all over the world. In Pakistan, we're doing some cloud computing. the frustration we have at this moment is of the application. Application move towards it, we'll definitely move forward with it.
I was just, I'm just throwing the question out. So who leads the applications into the cloud, and therefore, where does the demand get driven, and where do all these issues get resolved? Who takes the first?
I mean, a lot of the vendors are, when you write a software as a SaaS, so when you write a software, you have to rewrite it. You cannot just expect an existing application to quickly redistribute it and send it over to cloud. This cannot happen. So most product vendors are now at least claiming that they are rewriting or coming up with newer versions of their software which are actually SaaS enabled, which means that you can more easily push them to the cloud. There is not much evidence of that out there, and at the very basic level, like databases, there is absolutely no movement to move to a SaaS environment. Data architectures, data structural inconsistencies and compatibility issues. So I think cloud it's a good academic discussion, but it's quite a ways away from actually helping us in our day-to-day issues of technology. I'll take another minute here, and I'm gonna ask another question from a slightly different angle. We've got UPL here, NIB, Angro. These are like the bigger houses, the bigger shops in Pakistan. Huge infrastructure, IT infrastructure. I run a very small shop, so I've got like 16 servers, 2 terabytes of data, and that's about it. So I've got 48 services. I know what they are. I've got a couple of people monitoring and managing them. So my question to you is, where is the cutoff point to actually move to a more sophisticated environment, or the IT management or the environment management framework like you just described? And HP also claims they have something similar, IBM, so on and so forth. So from working in this region, I would like to ask you, where is like the cutoff? Once you have like 80 servers, does it make sense to do this? Once you have more than 20 apps, does it make sense to do this? So just help me understand that a little bit.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt one more point here? I'm sorry I'm cutting him off here. Just one small point, you have 16 servers, I have 2. I don't have financial institution with regulatory compliances, providing better services than most other in our industry, most others, I'm not saying all others. Probably the smallest teams in the sector, but still running with the services. Again, same question from a different perspective, a very different size here, right? But again, our concerns remain the same. We still want our services running. We still want the same application which probably the largest companies are running. We're running the same application. Our data size is a bit different. Our user numbers are a bit different. So again, same question, cut off. 2 servers, where do you go?
So, let me try and address it in a different manner, and maybe correct me if I'm going on a tangent. What I heard here, one of the pieces was in terms of that, today if you look at applications, they're not ready for the cloud, right? ISVs will need to rewrite those applications to the cloud. If you really look from that context, today Novell is taking a lead in that space. We have an offering which also was mentioned in the video that I ran, which talks about SUSE Studio. SUSE Studio, from context of the tool, is prima facie to help organizations, large enterprises, as well as ISVs to build workloads which could be made portable. Let me give you an example. We have today a relationship with Adobe, when Adobe basically has built an appliance which could be run on any hypervisor. The advantage of that appliance running on any hypervisor, on an IBM running their Lotus suite on an appliance, or maybe a Ingress running their database on an appliance or a portable workload framework, the advantage of that is that prima facie it allows you to move your applications on any architecture that you want. You could take it to a cloud because it's going to be agnostic to the hardware. It could support any hypervisor. So today, some of the application vendors, when they are looking at their traditional applications and trying to look at saying how do we take it as a software as a service, they're basically trying to see in terms of how could I make that application bundled along with the basic infrastructure of OS and security and manageability, patching, audit and compliance, so that I can give this out in a much more secure fashion. coming to the question around saying that is there a cutoff? I think the cutoff really lies from a context of how you want to look at your IT architecture and landscape, right? If you're happy managing your environment within the cost pressure, within the security pressure, within the compliance pressures that you have, you could continue doing that, right? And we see organizations running 5,000 and 10,000 servers and still not doing the cloud way. But the cutoff will really come in place when you basically see either new technologies forcing you to start thinking, saying that any which way that application is in the cloud, and I am just doing basic productivity stuff or basic application pieces in my management, why do I have to have two infrastructures? I can give an example. Today, if you look from a real-time collaboration standpoint, it's impossible for all of us to restrict a Facebook or a Twitter or a Google or a Yahoo to come into your enterprise environment. And you might say, no, that's not true because I stopped my internet access and I blocked that site, etc., etc. But then you are limiting creativity for your users. You're not allowing them to become more productive. So you have these applications sitting in the cloud somewhere where a lot of your exchanges around your IP, your data, your strategies, what your company is doing, your brand positioning, all that is getting exchanged with the external users, and you have absolutely no control in terms of ensuring that what is going out, what's coming in. Now in that scenario, let's say for example your case, you have a set of users where they are leveraging a Google Mail, for example, they're leveraging a LinkedIn or a Facebook or some of these collaborative sites for doing your your group work, your teaming and collaboration pieces, right? And probably you have someplace an X drive or something which you've given to your users for online storage because they are very secure. I would say, why are you running two servers in your environment? Maybe because of the limitation that you are still not confident that that specific application or that specific environment is not secured enough to be pushed out into the cloud. A classical example I can also give is around the fact that today some of the security technologies that you deploy in your internal firewalling, internal environment, it is not necessary that those internal security features are going to be available from the cloud service provider as well. So to my mind, I think the cutoff really is from the context of two pieces. One piece is the fact that how much of the external applications, the consumer-friendly applications, are bringing into your enterprise, and how does it impact your control and your compliance and your security pieces. And the second is, how do you want to leverage your IT? Do you want to leverage an environment where you say, well, 16 is not enough, 80 is enough, 80 is not enough, 200 is enough? Or you want to go from a context of saying that, well, I am paying $1 for every dollar of revenue that my business generates, right? So business is basically defining that, okay, I am spending $1 on IT because it helps me to drive $1 of business. Cutoff could be there, and it could be different for different people.
Moving into the cloud area, and also, Numan, it's rather funny that you said that, from an academic standpoint, and the gentleman sitting next to you is from the academia. Dr. Zahid Nasir, he's heads up the computer science department at IBA, and I mean a terrific insight to get into the kind of work that he and IBA is doing. So I mean, trying to get into the cloud and so on and so forth. Yes, those challenges are there. Yes, those hesitancies are there. Yes, the regulatory restraints and constraints are also there. But I mean, what are your thoughts? Because we haven't heard from you. I know, Shabesa, you mentioned size was one of the biggest problems. So does, for example, virtualization help? Can you define that, the ROI on that? So I think if we can just have a brief discussion on that, and then perhaps move towards this area of green, because I know that Imran Dawoodi from Engro, when he registered, you asked, so what green? How do you go green? So I think perhaps one of those discussions also. Also, before I say so much when I get the mic, we've got dinner served. We've got another, let's say, half an hour or so, but you're welcome. Just grab a plate, bring it back, and add to the discussion also. So we're listening to from pharma or from hospitality, how's that? Or sure, that's that. And then you go to Hilton.
I think that would address by and large a part of the question. In terms of addressing cloud computing as an educational or or just something which is good on paper. It's not that much true. The implementation is very much there, but the picture that we have today and how it would look like in the future is quite different. Today we have a constraint because the regulatory requirements does not permit us to go in a true nature of cloud. That means going out of the boundary of the country premises and the other security requirements. But then cloud has another aspect to it. Like for example, I'll give you an example as a strategy point of view. I've set up a DR site, and I'm giving you a hypothetical example here of how you could actually implement a cloud here, practically speaking. That you have a DR site which is sitting idle, running less than 5% of your utilization resources, costing you an X amount of dollars, and you have a production site that is running. But there is a peak that hits you, let's say, every week, Monday, and then on Thursday, and that's it. Now, rather than beefing up your hardware at the production site, you implement the cloud in such a way that you pull out the resources out of your DR site, put them all together, and use that existing X amount of dollars that you have put in place, which you are not using, because I hope we all agree to this point that the disaster would never come into pass, to the extent that we lose up everything. So by and large, what I meant to say is that it's just not educational. It might just be the implementation would be slightly different. It's not that cloud that you go into the arena of the internet connectivity and then you go out of the boundary and boundary there. But yes, the implementation is very much there, even as of today.
But that has been around for about 20 years now. Companies have been using their load balancing and resource sharing between their primary and secondary sites. So
there's a market gimmick that keeps changing the buzzwords and keep bouncing.
I would just like to add a small comment here. What I'm hearing from the group, I think, is that we are gradually moving toward a stage where we need to actually look at the nature of data that we have. And from this discussion, what I think is that there's at least two broad categories that we can basically divide our data into. One is that kind of data that can be probably pushed out onto the cloud. We might be more happy to use virtualization or other technologies and use software as service to process that data. And there's another kind of data that we want to keep tight control on and have our own hardware to store it, have our own software architecture, our own personnel taking care of that. However, I would definitely agree with this that with the real-time collaboration and all those other things that are coming up, it is becoming increasingly difficult to basically actually even define the boundary of your own ownership on data. What is your own data? If I'm an employee of an organization and I have a private Facebook page, whatever I write there, do you own that data or that employee owns that data individually? Or is there a link? What kind of link is that? So I think probably we'll have to look at the nature of data itself in order to make such decisions.
Just to connect to your point, not only is it the nature of the data, it's also the nature of the organization. Some organizations, irrespective of the size, cannot afford any sort of downtime. Now, you mentioned that cloud computing could be used in a semi-controlled, without going into the whole internet connectivity direction, which is fine, but that only works for larger organizations who would have access to larger resources like that. Coming to smaller organizations, coming to smaller shops and even smaller software houses, even at times, the service vendors which tend to service us run in shops that are very much more smaller than us and run on highly virtualized and or cloud computing based environments. I know many companies that have moved to Gmail for hosting their email, and they've just said, we're sick and tired of running our own stuff. I know many academic institutions have. But that subjects your internet connectivity to a certain degree of extra load, maybe, because then again, that's a cost that many organizations have to be concerned about. Because there's standard cost for doing operations and business related. And then when you're doing standard internet usage for business purposes, and then there's additional internet usage which is now coming in because you were using bot email. which is because you were using certain cloud computing based storage for your data. So that does become an additional cost for most companies, smaller companies especially. Larger companies may not worry, but I'm talking from a smaller company perspective at the moment. It would become a concern. I just set up a small company, it's fine, I would go and do it, but at a point of time where I cannot afford any minute of downtime, and in Pakistan's अभी तो हमारे पास पहले एक इंटरनेट कनेक्टिविटी अब 3 हो गई, there's some sort of respite. But still, I'd be thinking about taking risk for at least 2 more years and just wait and watch before I move my data. And again, it all comes down also to the critical nature of the data itself. Can we afford to let it out of our hands? Regulatory compliance in the financial sector at least doesn't allow for data to be out of physical control. While physical control essentially defines the presence of a fixed server and certain security parameters around it, and then backed up by DR plans and backup plans, that essentially puts an envelope around the physical control that you have over data. And that is required especially for the financial sector, which is probably the most regulated IT structures in Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken.
Can I just quickly ask a question? Because for the financial sector, perhaps the regulator is dictating what you can and what you can't do. How about the MNCs, for instance, Shabisa, what's your global policy? What does GSK say about cloud computing? Is this something that's encouraged? Is this something that's desired? Or is this something that's just absolutely off the table?
As far as cloud computing is concerned, we have already moved in the direction. We used to have our own email servers in our places. Now we are moving towards using some other service providers. So, and that's basically we are a corporate company, and strategies we basically run from our corporate headquarters. So that is a step that has already taken. As far as the virtual space is concerned, we have already done away with our local AS forms that we had sometime back in 2004, 2005. We now have LPAs sitting somewhere in the US, we don't know where it is. And countries around the world are using those LPAs and accessing the data. Again, some countries do have restriction of placing their data in a particular country, like Pakistan will not put its data in India. So there is those kind of limitations, but otherwise there is no limitation where you can post your data.
I had one thought which I thought I'll kind of tickle your place and get an answer. I heard a lot of people mentioning that the country regulates the fact that data has to be in physical possession. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
I think it's not only the country, it's the regulator. For
It's
example,
the regulator does.
it's dependent upon the application that you are developing. For example, we are talking about financial applications. So there has to be PCI DSS compliant, there has to be EMG compliant, there has to be 27001 compliant. So these are not only country specific, they are globally specific.
Sure. So I'm not really trying to get here in terms of that your country is regulation, but I'm saying the regulation demands for the data to be in a physical environment because of security challenges and compliance challenges and so on and so forth.
The regulatory environment does not put you in a place where you are compelled to essentially keep it in completely physical environments. You can, but it specifies certain guidelines that will allow you, will do not allow you to go beyond certain levels.
So which means you can't take it out of your organization, right?
I won't say out of the organizations. I think you can use hosted data
If you're talking about applications,
yes.
they cannot go into cloud computing because the international auditors audit those locations where data is kept.
Yes.
So you cannot move the data out of your premises into cloud because that cannot be audited actually.
Yeah, so those are the two pieces which you have to touch upon. What is the fact that while he...
Yeah, this is third point also. Somebody mentioned about the organization itself. Like my management can spend millions of dollars as long as the boxes are sitting in their office. And they are very concerned that even if an email goes out of the company, so they want to make sure that the email reaches the right person and it does not stray away from its path, right? As far as the data is concerned, and we advise them or we suggest to go to the cloud, the most and when we tell them that there's a lot of cost saving also, they want to say yes to it because they are
security challenges.
Yeah.
No, that is what I basically wanted to bring on the table, saying that today when you have your data and you are concerned with security challenges, by either moving it out of your organization, right? I think if you look at the way analysts are tracking the data security challenges, more than the external security threat, the data security threats are more internal today, right? It's more about how do you not only ensure that those USBs goes in and those M players and iPods goes in, but it also from a standpoint of saying that how do I ensure that I know who exactly is accessing the data for what purpose and why. That's one. Second, you mentioned the fact that some of these applications and some of this data cannot be sent out because then they are not auditable because of the fact that the auditor would need to go in and kind of do their reports. So that's where some of our thought process on intelligent workload management comes in by saying, how could I make that workload intelligent enough to allow you to get access to log reports, allow you access to access control reports, which could be used by your auditing tool or by your auditors as proof of the fact that yes, that environment is auditable and is compliant, right? So one of the basic pieces that we are seeing today is that it's no longer possible for you to keep something in your possession and be confident that this is secure, because maybe the threat is not external, the threat is internal. Do you agree? Do you see that? Do you see that as a challenge with some of your applications and data that people are...
I think this is also very intelligent workload management on my part. Look at the streamlined line for dinner. But sorry.
As far as the internal controls are concerned, the management is already taking care of that. But as soon as the data goes out of the company, that's where they are already they are shaking.
No, but look at it on a context. I think we are really saying in terms of that management is taking control of it. But what happens in a situation where a management, because of an exception, has to deviate to that control?
I think by and large overall in the industry, the DLP, data loss prevention, is the biggest challenge. Most of the time it's being overlooked because of the controls, and sometimes because of the flexibility that is being required by the people who are into business. Someone claiming that I need to have this laptop and I need to have administrative rights because I go there and I need to run my laptop in this configuration and I need to connect to a Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
Yes, by and large, this is the biggest challenge today in the industry. And in my personal opinion, time to come, there's a lot of investment from the IT side would be done on the DLP side.
Yeah.
The endpoint security.
Absolutely. So we agree to the fact that yes, endpoint security is a burning issue in the industry today. But what we are basically trying to throw at you as a thought is in terms of saying that how do you move the access control and the auditable and the compliant requirements to be moved into the workload rather than retaining it at the user. Trying to say this, let's say in an SAP environment, if you had to set up a policy by saying that I am the administrator, I basically define the rules, right? How do you go about saying that well, he is an administrator, he's done something which is beyond policy? And that can only happen when your application, SAP, or for that matter, any enterprise application that you're running, has got some intelligence which could still try and say, well, this is violation of a policy.